Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutia. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. These are feeds coming into the broadcast center. We're going to dig into every story happening where you are. So let's begin. President Trump meets with the new leader of Syria on the sidelines of his Middle East trip, how the reversal of sanctions on Syria could impact stability in the region. Citing testimony in Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial, what to expect from his ex-girlfriend during her second day on the stand. And a step closer to freedom, we'll break down a judge's ruling that paves the way for the Menendez brothers to leave prison decades after killing their parents. This is CBS News 24/7. We begin, though, in the Middle East, where the president of the United States is in Qatar for the next leg of his three-country tour. He started, of course, in Saudi Arabia and will next head to the United Arab Emirates. Before he left Doha, though, he met with Syria's new president. Now, this comes, of course, on the heels of announcing yesterday that the U.S. would be lifting sanctions on that country. President Trump vowed U.S. support as Syria tries to rebuild after years of war and regime change. He also urged Syria to recognize Israel's statehood. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is joining us live right now from Doha. Good to see you, Nancy. So what more can you tell us about this meeting between President Trump and Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharar?
Well, it was arranged by the Saudis, and there was a big question mark, Vlad, whether this meeting would even take place. After all, this new president of Syria is someone who the U.S. once viewed as being the head of a terrorist group. He had pledged his allegiance to al-Qaeda in the past. So they had some deep concerns, but he is also viewed as an improvement over the former leader of Syria, the leader that his group pushed out, the dictator Bashar al-Assad. And so the president was willing to go into that meeting at the urging of the Saudis and others here in the Middle East who are really hoping that this new chapter for Syria works out and makes things safer for everyone in the region. And so they had that meeting. The president said that it is time for Syria to shine. He urged the new president of Syria to sign the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations with Israel. And in this surprise move, he lifted sanctions that had been in place for such a long time on Syria, another sign of the hope that this White House has and that Middle Eastern leaders have that perhaps this will be a stable new alternative to the prior regime.
Nancy, just so you know, we're just showing some live pictures coming in to us of the President of the United States who is participating in a signing ceremony that is happening right now in Qatar. I don't know. It was sort of like yesterday we saw him signing documents with the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia. Weren't exactly sure what those documents were. It's not clear unless you have some insight as to what the president is signing at the moment.
The only insight I have, Vlad, is that it's likely some kind of investment deal that he is signing there with the Emir of Qatar. And it's not surprising that we don't have many details. We tend to get more information about these signings after they take place. But if yesterday is any indication, the president's main goal while he is here in the Middle East is to drum up new investment for the U.S. And so it's likely that this deal he's signing right now has something to do with that. The man he's sitting with, the Emir, is someone with whom he shares a very close relationship. This is someone who came to visit him at Mar-a-Lago last September before Trump was even elected president for a second time. And it is that man sitting right next to him who is the one who offered Trump a $400 million gift, a 747 that we've all been talking about so much over the last couple of days for use as Air Force One. It's generated a lot of controversy back in Washington from Democrats and many Republicans who feel that it would be not only unseemly to accept a gift of this size from a foreign country, but in particular a gift from the nation of Qatar, which obviously is oil-rich, gas-rich, has very deep pockets, but at the same time has ties to Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. And they think that the White House should proceed with caution.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I want to talk about that, Nancy. But I've always wanted to say this, Nancy. This just in, from our producer, our executive producer, Eric Berlin, who tells me that the agreement that the president is signing along there with the defense secretary has to do with defense cooperation between Qatar and the United States. So in addition to perhaps some of those economic agreements that he's going to be signing, this first document seems to be around this idea of defense cooperation between the two. But as you say, there are real concerns about the government of Qatar, though somewhat of an ally to the United States. This notion that they fund terrorism in funding and backing Hamas, Hezbollah, and working very, very closely with Iran is something that is concerning in a bipartisan fashion, I must say, which is rare these days in Washington.
Yeah, and it's a really tricky relationship because despite those concerns, even President Biden declared Qatar an ally because we have a major airbase in Qatar. It's a launching point for operations in Iraq and elsewhere, and it's very important to the United States. In fact, President Trump is going to be visiting it tomorrow. And even before this deal that was signed, which Eric so helpfully tells us has to do with defense cooperation, the U.S. had already agreed to sell weaponry to Qatar. Let's listen in to what the president has to say.
It's going to work out. I think it's going to work. It's got to work out one way or the other. We know it's going to work out. But you were of great help, and other things. But in particular, trade. The trade is the. Kelly's telling me from Boeing, it's the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. That's pretty good. And that's 140. Was that a 140 or 160? Well, yeah, but you're right. It's actually 200, including the 40. So it's over $200 billion. But 160 in terms of the jets. That's fantastic. So that's a record, Kelly. And congratulations to Boeing. Get those planes out there. Get them out there. But I just want to thank you. We've been friends for a long time, long before politics. Well, for you it was politics. For me it wasn't, right? But we've been friends for a long time, and this is an outstanding man. He's a great man, and we're going to help each other. The United States is in a very strong position militarily. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. You're buying a lot of that equipment, actually, and I think we're going to see some of it in action tomorrow at the, we won't call it an air fair, but it's going to be sort of an air fair. We're going to be shown a display that's going to be incredible. They have the latest and the greatest of our planes and just about everything else. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting. But I just want to thank you for the friendship, for the long-time friendship. And again, long before any of this stuff, we just liked each other. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But we always had a very special relationship. And we came from Saudi Arabia, where we have another great man over there.
All right. You just heard there, Nancy, the president of the United States, there speaking with the emir of Qatar. One thing that I also, Nancy, in addition to commenting on the plane that the government of Qatar is offering the president, the president yesterday in delivering remarks in the region, you probably know the quote better than I do, that diplomacy, the notion that a U.S. president generally does not criticize other presidents, let alone other American citizens when they're traveling abroad. Yesterday, the president, in delivering formal remarks, suggested that the President Biden was incompetent, that there was an incompetency over the last 4 years. I wonder if anybody's been asked about that from the administration as to why the president would do something like that while abroad.
I don't think President Trump or his aides have been asked about it yet. It's not surprising, perhaps, for Trump, but it is surprising for a president of the United States to make comments like that once they leave U.S. airspace. Typically, partisan differences tend to get left at the water's edge, and we like to present a unified front when American politicians are abroad. So again, not unusual for Trump to talk this way, but when a U.S. president is abroad, absolutely. Saying that your predecessor was incompetent, telling Gulf state leaders that he didn't do anything, that he had the wrong allegiances in the Middle East, those kinds of things are historically quite unusual for a president of the United States.
Yeah. Nancy Cordes, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much. Stay cool. I know it's pretty hot out there.
You got it.
Thanks, Nancy. All right, let's bring in CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. He's also a former national security advisor under the first Trump administration. So, General, just your thoughts on that last question that I asked Nancy about a president of the United States criticizing a predecessor, again, in a part of the world where, as you know, it's been quite difficult for the United States when it comes to diplomacy and strategy, not just under President Biden, under the first Trump administration, under President Obama, and before that, under President Bush. So I'm just curious as to your thoughts as to a president criticizing a political opponent while abroad.
Well, Vlad, hey, that's just, of course, not surprising. I don't think to anybody who knows President Trump. I mean, he doesn't have a filter, right, between what he thinks and what he says. Sometimes that's positive, sometimes that's negative. I don't think it's good to disparage another American leader when you're abroad. But what makes Trump effective sometimes is that he says these things that are arresting, and he's so transparent that I think it throws off some of the people with whom he's having these conversations, the leaders of other countries, and that can be to his advantage, because he is without artifice. He's pretty transparent, and oftentimes when leaders have these kind of exchanges, there's an ulterior motive, and they're trying to be persuasive by maybe hiding their true intentions. With Trump, that's not the case, and so of course it can be offensive. It can break protocol. It can be concerning to us, Vlad, but sometimes it's effective for him.
Let me ask you about this. The administration is touting this $142 billion arms package signed with Saudi Arabia, calling it the largest defense sales agreement in history. I thought it was sort of, the juxtaposition of Air Force One coming into Saudi Arabia, General, and having those fighter jets accompanying the Air Force One in. Those jets are probably jets that we paid for. But how is this boosting military defense in the Middle East?
Well, President Trump would always tell me, hey, I'm all about reciprocity, reciprocal. And so what he wants is he wants a strong economic relationship and economic benefit to the United States if we provide, for example, defensive capabilities to Qatar and our forward presence, right, of our joint military force in Qatar. We're the big dog on Qatar's front porch. Qatar's a very tiny but very wealthy country that has difficult relations and has had difficult relations with Saudi Arabia and with Iran, and some territorial disputes with Iran. So having us there provides a tremendous benefit to Qatar. The president, the way he thinks, right? He thinks he's a real estate guy from his background. He thinks, hey, I want something for that. We should have a beneficial economic relationship. And so what you're seeing are these kind of big deals, commercial deals, a lot of military deals. And it is, of course, a benefit to the United States. It's U.S. jobs. Qatar pays for everything, right? They've got the money to do it. It's not foreign military assistance. This is foreign military sales. And what it does for our defense as well are these sales drive the unit cost down of a lot of these weapon systems and aircraft. And of course, it does provide us with a degree of influence, in the region. So anyway, I'm all for it, Vlad, if it's part of an integrated approach to the region that advances our overall interests there, which are many, right? The Middle East is an arena of great power competition with China and Russia. And also, we know that what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East, right? And especially the problem of jihadist terrorism, the horrible violence that we've seen in the region, and refugee crises associated with it. And of course, Iran's effort to extend hegemonic influence in the region, keep the Arab world perpetually weak and enmeshed in conflict and to threaten Israel. There are a lot of really crazy dynamics going on in the Middle East these days. It's anything but static. I have to see President Trump and the United States engaged in the region at this critical moment.
No, an excellent point there. And actually, General, I misspoke. I meant to say that the Saudis bought those planes from us, and that's why this defense agreement is so instrumental.
Right.
That we probably built the planes, and they are huge buyers of American, as you say, American weapons, American aircraft, American military aircraft. The other interesting note about what's been happening in Saudi Arabia, General, is that they've been hosting, they have been the hosting site for many peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. And President Trump says that Putin wants him there. I want to play for you and for our viewers what he had to say while sitting down with the Emir of Qatar about reaching a deal very soon. Listen to this.
It will bring peace not only here, but I know you're very much involved in helping us in other regions, like what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, etc. And I think we're having some pretty good news coming out of there today and maybe tomorrow and maybe Friday, frankly.
So could the presence of the President of the United States help these talks move along? I know that the president has tweeted at Vladimir Putin. I guess the question is, how seriously does Vladimir? We know that Volodymyr Zelensky takes President Trump very seriously. We saw that after that Oval Office meeting. But how seriously does Vladimir Putin take President Trump, his presence, his pressing, whether through social media or through diplomatic means, to try and end this really brutal and horrific war?
Well, hey, I think Putin wants President Trump there now because he's kind of on the back foot. He thought that he could get away with signing up for a small ceasefire, but continuing his onslaught against Ukraine, as he has in recent weeks and months. Completely disingenuous about any kind of intention to end kind of the murderous attacks on Ukraine. He's trying to offload responsibility for the war, saying that we have to address these primary drivers of the conflict and fundamental issues. And then what he thought he could do is kind of put off any kind of a discussion with Zelensky by, instead of offering a ceasefire, say, oh, let's have a talk. Well, Zelensky took him up on it, which was smart, to keep the pressure on Putin. Putin wants to alleviate that pressure. And what he wants from President Trump is President Trump's support for an agreement that is unacceptable to Zelensky. Then he can isolate Zelensky from U.S. support. I don't think he's going to get it, but that's what he's trying hard for, Vlad. And what he'll do with President Trump is, he'll try to flatter him. He'll try to highlight their mutual sense of aggrievement. Oh, you've been treated so badly, President Trump, and so have I too. And then he'll hold out the prospect for big deals. Oh, I can help you with Iran. Hey, let's reduce nuclear weapons, and then he'll portray anybody else as weak and him as strong. Like he's trying to create this myth, that Ukraine is profoundly weak and he's in a strong position. Hey, Vlad, he's in a very weak position. And as oil prices drop, he's in a weaker position. And so, I think President Trump is not going to fall for it. Putin's going to push it like Kim Jong-un tried to push it with President Trump during Trump 1 to get a deal that would have been cut against our interests. I think President Trump's going to see through that. Vladimir Putin's going to be disappointed. And I think what you'll see is the Trump administration kind of back in to an effective approach to Putin, which is imposing costs on him and stopping him by convincing him that he can't win in Ukraine. And I think until he's convinced of that, we're not going to get like an end to this war, because Putin won't stop until he is stopped, Vlad.
Fascinating. Really good insight there, as always, from Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. Sir, as always, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Hey, you too, Vlad. Thanks.
All right, jurors in the sex trafficking and racketeering trial against Sean Diddy Combs is hearing additional testimony today from his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is outside the courthouse with the very latest.
Sean Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, is back on the stand for her second day of testimony. She is 8 months pregnant as she is testifying up there about very graphic testimony and also pornographic testimony related to their relationship. Cassie Ventura was with Sean Combs for over a decade, starting from when she was about 21 years old. And we've learned a lot about the sexual activities that he introduced her to, what were called freak-offs that they engaged in, where he liked to watch her have interactions with other men. But a big element of this was that there was a lot of setup involved. And we're starting to see the prosecution put together their case through their questioning of Cassie Ventura, where they're asking her a lot of questions about who else was involved in this scheme. She has said that his bodyguards and trusted assistants were often part of the process, bringing money, bringing supplies, going to the hotel rooms afterwards to clean up the mess, as well as helping to transport escorts to meet them in other cities So this really ties into the racketeering and transportation for the purpose of prostitution charges against Combs, as well as sex trafficking. When we left off yesterday, Cassie was testifying about the 2016 security footage from the Intercontinental Hotel, which is footage many people may have seen. It was obtained by CNN years ago, and you can see Combs appearing to assault Cassie Ventura in that footage. We have started to learn about her side of that story, what that experience was like from her, and we will continue to check in on that. Back to you.
All right, Katrina, thank you very much. Coming up, Pete Buttigieg went after the Trump administration during a town hall last night. Is he laying the groundwork for potential presidential run? We'll tell you. But first, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a preview of the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, it's the middle of May, but it feels like the middle of summer for 12 million people across Texas today. We've got heat advisories in effect where temperatures are climbing well above normal, not just into the 90s, but we're talking triple-digit heat across the south. In fact, it's not just the heat, but we're also tracking the threat for severe weather. That heat soars to the north. It runs into a low-pressure system. It's going to produce this threat for severe weather later on today. We will highlight everything that you need to know. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We're coming right back.
This morning, the House Ways and Means Committee advanced a portion of the GOP budget plan after an intense overnight meeting. It's one of three House panels that met yesterday to consider the bill aimed at advancing President Trump's agenda. The legislation would slash spending at least by $880 billion, including major cuts to Medicaid. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. All right, Nicole, update us on the latest.
Well, right now the House Energy and Commerce Committee is still meeting, and that is the committee that is charged with handling these potential cuts to Medicaid. That is in part why it has been taking so long, because keep in mind they started meeting yesterday afternoon around 2 p.m. Eastern. Obviously, we're well into mid-morning the following day, so they are steadily approaching the 24-hour mark as they try to move through this. Democrats have continued to try to raise the plight of various Medicaid recipients, holding up signs, reading different testimony from some of their constituents, also trying to introduce various amendments to try to blunt some of these cuts. But Republicans, for their part, are accusing Democrats of exaggerating the situation. You know, they say that this isn't about cutting Medicaid per se, or even going after those core benefits for people who need them. They continue to argue that this is about trying to strengthen the program, trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And so that is why they they have proposed, for instance, work requirements, tightening some of the eligibility standards, which they insist will make the program better. But clearly there's been an ongoing debate about that between both sides, which again is why this continues to stretch into a second day.
So how divided, Nicole, are House Republicans over all this?
Well, I would say, they are trying to unify behind this bill. Obviously, there are some more moderate members, Republicans, that is, who are a little concerned about some of these potential cuts to Medicaid. They don't want them to be too deep, but I think we saw with respect to the proposal that Energy and Commerce put out, they ended up not being as deep as some speculated, even though some feel that they still go too far. There are many conservatives, though, who think that some of these cuts should go even further. So that has been a point of contention, but still leadership feels confident that they can get this done. Also, of course, you have a divide over some of the tax issues that remain unresolved, most notably this issue of SALT. I believe Speaker Johnson is speaking to reporters now, so let's take a listen.
We had a candlelight vigil last night, or a couple of those events last night that we participated in. You can't give honor where honor is due enough, especially around this subject. And people put their lives on the line every single day. The numbers are staggering. After the candlelight vigil last night, we went, as Sheriff Rutherford mentioned, Representative Rutherford mentioned, we went to the National Law Enforcement Memorial this morning, and it was misty, and the weather was sort of appropriate because it's when you walk that place and you see the names of more than 24,000 officers whose names are etched into the stone there, it really moves you. And we lost 345 fallen heroes this year alone. They'll be etched into the memorial. So there were many officers out there and just paying their respects, and we placed wreaths. It's some small token, but look, I come from a first responder family, and I know that sacrifice. I grew up at the Fire and Police Training Academy in my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, because my dad was a training officer. He was on the fire side of it, and he also worked the line. And when I was 12 years old, he got burned in an explosion on the job. 80% of his body, third-degree burns. He had a 5% chance to live, 5%. He came back miraculously and survived, but he was terribly disabled for the rest of his life, and his co-captain died in that fire. They're on the hazmat team.
All right, you've been listening there to Speaker Mike Johnson, and we have been talking to Nicole Killion, who is live on the Hill, talking to us about the budget process that is making its way through the House. So nothing really sort of earth-shattering there from the Speaker, Nicole. Are we expecting to hear anything that might make news over the next couple of hours?
Well, I think so. Obviously, this was the top of the Speaker's news conference, and he was acknowledging Police Week, and that he held a vigil just last night here on Capitol Hill with a number of law enforcement officers. So it seemed that he was speaking about that first, but more than likely he will get a lot of questions about the status of this reconciliation package and where things stand. As we were saying before we tossed to him, one of the sticking points continues to be this issue of SALT, or the state and local tax deductions. Right now, there is a cap of $10,000 that people can deduct, and this primarily impacts a lot of people who live in places where you are, Vlad, like New York. So that is why a lot of members of the New York delegation are pushing to raise this cap. Their argument is that this continues to be a burden for a lot of families there who are paying these high state and local taxes, so they want to be able to deduct more of them. So there have been a lot of very robust discussions about how much to raise that cap. In terms of House Ways and Means, which approved their package this morning, they proposed raising that cap to $30,000, but even some members of the New York delegation say that's insulting. It's not enough, and so they potentially want to see that number go even higher, but certainly there's some concern that that may be a bit too far for members in other states, who feel that they shouldn't have to share in the burden of people who live, in the Northeast. So that is kind of the ongoing discussion. The Speaker did meet with some of those lawmakers last night, but feels confident he can reach a deal.
All right, Nicole Killion joining us from the Hill this morning. Thanks, Nicole. And still ahead, we're going to get a look at your forecast. Some of the parts of the United States are facing some unusually early record high temperatures. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. As we've seen reporting, President Trump is in Qatar as part of his second stop on his trip throughout the Middle East, although this trip is to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. A big focus has been on Syria and Iran. The president is hoping to make a major impact on security in the region. CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Keeley is here in Studio 55 and joins me now to talk about it. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
So let's talk about this meeting that the president had with Syria's new leader and what this potentially means for Syria's future. The idea that the president would normalize relations with Syria after a brutal civil war that lasted more than a decade.
Right. So President Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow, as we know, in December. And then Ahmed al-Sharaa, who was part of Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, which is a designated U.S. terrorist organization, came in and swept through Damascus, knocked out all of the Assad loyalists, and established an interim government. Now, there have been American sanctions on Syria that are crippling, and the Syrians under Bashar al-Assad, if you remember, all that wealth that they found of his cars and money, Syrians in poverty, suffering all of these years. So they were celebrating in Damascus. They are celebrating the lifting of these American sanctions. People are scratching their head in Washington saying, this guy was categorized as a terrorist.
He spent time in jail for terrorism.
And so, but during the Civil War, people switched horses a lot. You know, you'd be supporting an al-Qaeda faction, and then there'd be a different other faction, like the Jilani brigades or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Like, they did what they needed to do. So does that mean he's an honest broker? We have to wait and see. We really just don't know. But this is going to effectively trickle down, hopefully, to the Syrian people and give them some sort of financial help that they really need.
All right, so let's also talk, Courtney, about a conversation that we had yesterday. I want to drill down a little further into what potentially the United States is hoping with these talks, these nuclear talks with Iran. It's sort of interesting that this president is coming in with the intention of trying to figure out some level of diplomacy with the Iranians, and at the same on the same token, freezing Israel out of those discussions.
Right. So let's start with Saudis and Iranians, Sunnis and Shias.
Yeah.
This is Protestant and Catholic.
Going back to
this is
the
a
time
schism.
of the prophet.
Right. So we're talking about deep grievances and people don't get along. Iran did enjoy a lot of power in Syria under Bashar al-Assad. That was the land bridge that got missiles and munitions to Hezbollah and Hamas and possibly the Houthis. It was a free-for-all zone, and it was a land bridge, and you could move things in and out. That's gone. Iranians are out of Syria, and it looks like Saudi's ascendant, especially with this passionate love letter of a speech that President Trump said directly to Mohammed bin Salman. So the Iranians' reaction to this, the Iranian foreign minister who's heading up these Iranian nuclear talks, is we don't think categorizing us as the most destructive force in the Middle East is fair, essentially, is my interpretation. Not throwing down a gauntlet or a red line or saying, hey, that's enough with our foes. And also, the Saudis and the Iranians have been quietly mending ties on a lower level. So it looks like people are looking for the better options. Iran cannot turn on the electricity. It's so bad right now. They're watching these American sanctions being lifted in Syria. In the JCPOA under Obama, there was never anything about lifting American sanctions in Iran. A lot of people, again, wouldn't let that wouldn't play right in Washington. But if they do that for the Iranians, they might make that deal.
So does this mean then that given Iran's poor position economically speaking with all these sanctions, although they do have tons of oil, we should always remember that, as do the Saudis, are they considering ceding sort of the power in the region to the Saudis?
Well, they won't, because there's a lot of things they won't give up, like their missiles, their Shahed drones. They would square a circle in a very Iranian crafty kind of way, and then President Trump might claim a win. But just that narrow win could be very helpful for the Iranian people as well.
It's really interesting. Courtney Keeley, good to have you in studio.
Thanks
for stopping by. Appreciate it. All right, Pete Buttigieg campaigned for Democratic values at a town hall event in Cedar Rapids, Iowa last night. The former transportation secretary took aim at the current administration. Listen to this.
Freedom means freedom from overbearing government, something we should be able to join hands, progressives, conservatives, libertarians, at a moment when the President of the United States thinks he can send you to another country or shut down the broadcast license of a TV station if he doesn't like what it has to say. That is not freedom.
While the event has sparked rumors of a potential 2028 presidential bid, Buttigieg's former senior advisor joined CBS Morning News earlier to discuss the future.
Look, I really take my old boss at his word when he says he is evaluating, he's making sure that he's getting out there into the world and talking to people. You know, I think what's really interesting, Earl, about how we've seen him show up recently is he's showing up in ways that are, frankly, very difficult for other people to do. He was on that Flagrant podcast for 3 hours. He did Colbert.
When asked about a potential presidential campaign, Buttigieg replied, quote, "Right now, I'm not running for anything." Running from the heat, though, that's what's going on in Texas. Major concern for the National Weather Service says triple-digit temperatures will hit a big part of the state for next week. CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca, I believe, is live in San Antonio for us this morning. Hey there, Omar. Good thing they pop you up there, and a good thing you and I are friends. Good to see you, my brother. So what's it like out there? What kind of heat are we talking?
Well, extreme heat warning means triple digits, and the feel-like temperature will be a little bit hotter. 103 is what the expected temperature is. That's going to be fluctuating. Obviously, it'll feel warmer. And the frequency and intensity of these heat episodes is caused by climate change. Now, is San Antonio and South Texas used to this? Absolutely. But this early in May is reason why it's newsworthy, and people are paying attention to it now. Now, it's about 76, 77 degrees right now, as I was mentioning, slight breeze. But that's when people right now are out walking. They're out getting their early morning steps and taking the dog out for a walk. Because around noon, 1 o'clock, that's when it really becomes unbearable, and that heat is just oppressive during the day. So the city of San Antonio and the communities around here are telling people, get things done early, take frequent breaks if you have to be outside. Of course, hydrate, seek shade, rest if you need to. And if you can be indoors, be indoors.
All right, Omar Villafranca for us, live from San Antonio. Stay cool, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, let's continue to talk about this heat because it's not just across Texas, though that's where we have these heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. But, I mean, look, it's a lot of heat stretching all the way north. You've got 90s as far north as the Dakotas. And this heat is actually going to fuel the threat for severe weather as we get into the later this afternoon and then into the second half of the week. Let's talk about the heat a little bit more, though, and talk about some of these records that are out there expected to fall. San Antonio, looking at a high temperature of 105. The record is 97 degrees. That just blows it out of the water. Austin, 104. The record's 96. Dallas will be around 101. Record's 95. You can tell. We're going to be breaking records at 5-6 degrees warmer than those record high temperatures. San Antonio's forecast stays in the triple digits through at least Friday, and then they'll be right around that triple digit mark Saturday into Sunday. So this excessive heat just continues through the weekend and probably into early next week. Look at these numbers for today. You're talking about temperatures 10, 15, nearly 20 degrees warmer than normal, and that heat begins to swell to the east as we go into the weekend. Tallahassee looking at high temperatures into Saturday, staying in the middle 90s, not to mention all that humidity from that moisture coming in from the Gulf. So I mentioned the heat fueling the severe threat today. We've got a level 2 out of 5. That slight risk for severe storms there from Nebraska into the Dakotas. That area of low pressure is going to slowly move to the east. So we've got that threat for storms, damaging winds, hail as we go into this evening, but an even greater threat for severe storms across the Great Lakes states into the upper Midwest tomorrow. Wisconsin has an enhanced threat for severe storms tomorrow with that level 3 out of 5, and then those storms will continue to move to the east, right on that northern fringe of all that heat there across the mid-Mississippi Valley. Threat for severe weather continues, Vlad, into Friday. Back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Coming up, a stunning reversal from the MLB, why the league lifted its lifetime ban on several iconic players and who is now eligible to make baseball's Hall of Fame. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Major League Baseball is lifting the lifetime ban on the late Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, making both of them now eligible to be inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame. You'll recall Rose was banned initially forever, a lifetime ban for betting on games, and Jackson was a member of the infamous Chicago Black Sox, a team that was accused of fixing the 1919 World Series. I want to bring in William Roden for more on this. He's a columnist for ESPN's Escape, and he is also a longtime sports columnist who has written about this subject in the past. Bill, always great to see you, my brother, to talk about something like this. I thought Manfred's decision was sort of interesting, indicating that because Pete Rose has passed and the ban was a, quote, lifetime ban, that it doesn't mean anything if you remove the ban posthumously. What did you make of that?
It's a little bizarre. What you're saying is that it's not so much that what you did was wrong, but we're just going to wait. We're going to let you die. Now once you die and you can't enjoy it, now we're going to put you in the Hall of Fame. And it's a little bizarre, because the whole idea of this is that you're trying to preserve the integrity of an institution. So now, although he's died, you're going to make him immortal. You're basically now making Pete Rose immortal, giving him life forever, and putting in this institution which you want to keep pure and all that. So it's rather bizarre, and it just seems to be that what we're doing is like negotiating. Everything is now negotiable. We're negotiating integrity, morality. It was kind of right then. It was never right, but now we're kind of negotiating to make it right. So I am a believer in grace. I mean, we all need grace, but this seems to be cynical. Again, so we're saying to Barry Bonds, who should be in the Hall of Fame. They say, okay, Barry, just take a breath. We're going to wait till you die. And after you die and you can't enjoy it, then we'll put you in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. It just seems to be a peculiar way, a sort of inverted thing of reparations.
So it's interesting, and we were showing while you were talking there some of the reaction, which has been mixed. Mike Schmidt, who played with Pete Rose, seems to be okay with it. Others, including the son of Bart Giamatti, the commissioner who actually imposed the ban, are not. And I thought you raised an interesting point about Barry Bonds, right? If it's okay to allow Pete Rose and I don't even see how Shoeless Joe can get in, because you actually tried to throw a game. I mean, that's really, I really don't see how that would actually happen. But because there are mixed feelings about Pete Rose, it's folks like you, the sports writers, who vote for these guys to get into the Hall of Fame. What do you sense is the vibe amongst your peers?
Well, fortunately, I don't vote.
Oh, you don't vote?
No, I'm not one of the voters. That's one of the things I thought was great about the Times and other places, that we stay out of it. That's not our job, is to vote, whether you're an art critic or whatever. We don't vote. We just basically report. And if I did have a vote, I probably still wouldn't. I said, I would not vote for him. I mean, you got to be consistent, So you mentioned the whole thing with Bonds, let's put Kurt Flood in the Hall of Fame. That's sort of been my soapbox. Let's put people who actually tried to improve the game in the Hall of Fame. So the voters, and I'm not surprised by the players. Of course, they're playing. These guys are playing. Well, he hit whatever home, he's Mr. Hustle and all that. But we're talking about integrity of the game, and that's what's problematic. And remember, we're also in a period where Major League Baseball, the National Football League, the NBA, they're all in bed with gambling now. I mean, they're deeply in bed with gambling. So maybe it's also kind of a guilt trip. I mean, what they were talking was bad 40 years ago. Say, hey, man, no, gambling is real cool. That's another income stream. So there's a lot of hypocrisy that's bubbling up in this. But again, you began this by pointing out, which I think is the most cynical thing, is saying, okay, we want you to be dead so you can't enjoy it. Then we're going to put you in. But in doing that, we're giving this whole thing eternal life by putting you in the Hall of Fame. So it's something about it, man. It's just a little off base.
Yeah, I get your point, and my producer Eric corrected me and said that it's baseball writers specifically who vote for people to go into the Hall of Fame. But I thought your point about the immortality of the Hall of Fame, I think, is sort of interesting. And look, no one has has disputed, it's indisputable, the numbers that Pete Rose put up. It's indisputable that he loved the game, but what is also not in dispute is that he bet he bet on baseball. Right. He says he never bet against the team. He always bet to win. Right. But that's how do we know? And I just think it is sort of interesting that you would do this after the man has died.
Right. And for a long time, he lied about it.
Right.
That's another thing.
Right.
I mean, he lied about it. Never immediately fessed up. He lied about it till you got kind of cooked up. And I think with children, that's not negotiable. That's not negotiable. So maybe, it's our national pastime, and maybe that's a statement on where we are as a country now with integrity, morality. Everything's up for negotiation. What was right, what was wrong, now is right.
I agree with that point, Bill. It's like there are some things that are not up for negotiation, and you also pointed out you leave open the door for somebody to say, well, okay, what's wrong if Shohei Ohtani decides to gamble on the sport? If you let Pete Rose, even in the afterlife, get this really this really big honor, what's to stop this precedent from taking root? Right. William Roden, always great to talk to you, brother. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, got much more news ahead. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The digital torch has been passed over at the Vatican. Pope Leo XIV taking over the Vatican's official social media handles in the past 24 hours. The new pontiff took to Instagram to repeat the first words he spoke after becoming the 267th Pope. Peace be with you all. The post also featured pictures from his first day as the first American leader of the Catholic Church. Very cool. Does it for me, folks, but stay right where you are. After the break, Mugo Diwe's live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.